All right, let's get right into this one. I want you to picture a small, dusty village in Uttar Pradesh, India. You know, the kind of place where life just has this predictable, steady rhythm. Well, on one incredibly hot day, that rhythm was completely shattered by a story so bizarre, so unbelievable, it would eventually pull in scientists from halfway across the globe.
Okay, so the woman's name was Sumitra Singh, and on July 19th, 1985, she's standing right at her own doorstep when she suddenly just gasps for air and collapses. Her body turns this sickly yellow color. A local doctor is called in, and the diagnosis is fast and it is final. Sumitra is dead. Now, the village, it's just paralyzed, and it's not just grief, it's fear. Neighbors are whispering about, negative energies and telling the family they need to perform the final rites immediately.
So the women of the village, they gather to prepare Sumitra's body for the funeral. And that's when this impossible sound starts echoing from the room. It was this chilling, rhythmic cut, 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 almost like two bones striking each other over and over. The sound just kept getting louder, and it was so terrifying that it sent all 19 women who were in there screaming and running out into the street. And what happened next is what takes this story from a local tragedy to something else entirely. We're talking about a documented paranormal event. The women who were brave enough to actually look back into that room, well, they saw something that defied every single law of nature they had ever known. So, let's break down this unbelievable sequence of events, a story confirmed by 19 terrified witnesses. First, you have a local doctor who declares Sumitra Singh dead. Then, the village women gather to prepare her body for the funeral. Suddenly, that strange, creepy sound starts up, and all 19 women just flee the room screaming. And then, the climax. Sumitra's lungs inflate with a huge breath, her eyes fly open, and she sits straight up. So, you can imagine the relief her family must have felt, right? But it didn't last long. When her husband rushes to hug her, she shoves him away, yelling something like, "Who are you? Don't you dare touch me." She had no idea who he was. She didn't recognize her own parents. She didn't even recognize her own infant son, because the person looking out of Sumitra's eyes was a total stranger. Yeah, so that relief just vanished and turned into total confusion. See, the real mystery here wasn't just that a woman had come back from the dead. The mystery was who came back. It became very clear very quickly that they were dealing with two completely different women. I mean, just look at the contrast here. Sumitra Singh was, an illiterate, rural, kind of deferential woman. But this new woman, she was assertive, she sounded educated, and she claimed her name was Shiva Tripathi, a completely different person, a total 180. She was loud, she was forceful, and she was absolutely insistent that she was not Sumitra. And the changes were just so startling. All of a sudden, she started speaking some English. She adopted this more urban way of dressing. She wouldn't eat from the family's utensils, saying she was from a higher caste. And maybe the most heartbreaking part, she insisted her real sons were named Rinku and Tinku, crying for them constantly while showing no connection to Sumitra's own baby. So you have to ask, right? How could an illiterate woman who had never even left her village suddenly have a new language, a whole new set of memories, and a completely different identity? It's the question that baffled everyone. At first, the family thought, okay, maybe it's a psychological break, trauma from what happened. But the details she was giving were just too specific. It wasn't just illusion. So, while Sumitra's family is trying to figure out what on earth is going on, word starts to spread. You know how it is in small villages. These rumors about the strange woman in Sharifpura eventually travel, and they reach a man who, as it turns out, had just suffered his own terrible tragedy. And here's where the two stories collide. Check out this timeline. On May 19th, 1985, about 100 kilometers away, a woman named Shiva Tripathi is murdered. Then, on July 19th, Sumitra Singh dies and wakes up claiming to be Shiva. Then, a few months later, on October 19th, Shiva's actual father, Ram Tripathi, hears the rumors and shows up in Sharifpura. The timing is just chilling. And the moment he arrives, wow. When she heard the name Ram Tripathi, this woman, who had been pretty withdrawn, just leaps up, she runs outside and throws her arms around this man crying, "Papa!" It was this incredibly dramatic moment of recognition. This led to the photo album accusation. Ramsiya Tripathi, probably in total shock, shows her a wedding album. She starts going through it, correctly identifying every single relative. But then, he points to a photo of her sister-in-law, and she just stops. Her whole demeanor changes, and she points to the picture and accuses that woman of her murder. Well, as you can imagine, this incredible accusation blows the whole thing wide open. It goes from being a local legend to a national news story. And that news travels all the way to America, where it lands on the desks of a team of scientists who investigate, well, exactly these kinds of impossible claims. So you have to wonder, is this just some tragic folktale, or maybe an elaborate hoax? Or is it something more? The researchers who came to investigate were asking all the same questions. They needed to figure out what was really going on.
And let's be clear, this wasn't some TV ghost hunting crew. These were serious investigators from the University of Virginia, and they traveled all the way to this tiny village to uncover the truth. They were there to find a rational, scientific explanation for what happened.
And what they found was, well, astounding. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, and all the stories lined up. They confirmed, for a fact, that the two families had absolutely no prior contact. And most importantly, Sumitra Shiva knew all these tiny, accurate, verified details of Shiva's life and her murder that there was no way she could have known. They ruled out all the conventional explanations, fraud, fantasy, you name it.
In the end, the University of Virginia researchers called this a landmark example of a case where knowledge was displayed that could not have been obtained by normal means. Think about that. Their official conclusion was that the information she had, it couldn't have come from anywhere in the normal, physical world.
So what happens then? How do you live a life like that? One body, but two completely different lives inside it. How does that even work day to day?
Well, over time, a strange kind of merged existence took shape. She never gave up her identity as Shiva, but she did come to accept Sumitra's husband, Jagdish. And while she always grieved for her two sons, Rinku and Tinku, she raised Sumitra's son as her own. She completely rejected her old identity as Sumitra, but fully embraced her new one as Shiva, eventually living as this combined person, Sumitra Shiva.
And this wasn't some short-lived thing. She lived like this for another 13 years. That's a long time. She was Sumitra Shiva longer than she had been just Sumitra, before she finally passed away for good in 1998. So what does all this mean? I mean, if a mind, if memories, and a whole personality can exist after death and then inhabit a new body, what does that tell us about our understanding of life itself? The case of Sumitra Singh isn't just a spooky story. It's a meticulously documented scientific case that has never been debunked, and it forces you to ask a really profound question about what it means to be alive.